Look at your browser. Go ahead, really look at it. Not at the tab you're using right now, but at all of them. The ones stacked so tightly against each other that their titles have disappeared, reduced to small, unreadable slivers of color and favicon, a row of tiny monuments to every intention you've had and not yet acted on. There's an article about a country you thought about visiting once. A recipe you saved during a week when you genuinely believed you would cook more. A research thread you opened at 1 a.m. when sleep wouldn't come and your mind needed somewhere to go. A form you need to fill out, a video you mean to watch, a product you were considering buying, a Wikipedia page about something that felt urgent and interesting at the time and now sits silently in its tab like a guest you forgot you invited. Each one represents a moment, a specific, real moment, when your brain said this matters, keep this, come back to this. And you did keep it. You just never came back. And somewhere underneath everything else you're carrying today, you're carrying all of them too. There is a name for what the mind does with unfinished things, though it doesn't need a name to do its damage. The brain, that ancient and tireless record keeper, does not distinguish between a task left incomplete in the physical world and one left incomplete in the digital one. It treats an open tab the same way it treats an unmailed letter, an unanswered question, a door left slightly ajar in a house you're trying to leave. It keeps a thread attached to it, thin, almost imperceptible, but real, a filament of attention that runs from whatever you're doing right now back to everything you've marked as unfinished. And those filaments accumulate. Quietly, invisibly, without announcement or drama, they accumulate across weeks and months and years of saved links and downloaded files and folders named important or to do or misc, that final category being perhaps the most honest, a digital drawer into which we throw everything we cannot yet face organizing. You do not feel each individual thread. You feel the weight of all of them together, and you call it tiredness or lack of focus or the vague, persistent sense that you are somehow always behind. Meet someone we'll call Elena. She is organized in the ways that are visible. Her apartment is clean. Her calendar is color-coded. She replies to emails within the hour and never misses a deadline. But open her laptop and you enter a different world entirely. 43 browser tabs across 2 windows. A desktop so layered with files and screenshots and documents that the wallpaper beneath them hasn't been seen in months, buried like a landscape under snow. A downloads folder containing 847 items, the oldest dating back 3 years. None of them deleted because deletion feels permanent, and permanence feels dangerous when you are someone who needs to feel prepared for every possible future. She has bookmarked 1,200 articles under a folder called Read Later, and has read, at most, 11 of them. She has voice memos she recorded to herself and never played back, photos she meant to sort, podcasts downloaded for trips she already took. To anyone looking at her life from the outside, Elena is on top of things. But inside the machine she carries everywhere, inside the digital landscape that mirrors her inner world more honestly than any calendar ever could, there is a kind of chaos that never fully sleeps. Elena doesn't think about those tabs when she's working. She doesn't consciously inventory the downloads folder or feel the specific weight of each unread bookmark. But the brain is not waiting for her permission to do its accounting. It runs its checks quietly in the background, The way an old house settles at night, small sounds, small shifts, nothing alarming on its own, but cumulatively the signature of something that has been carrying weight for a long time. Every open tab is a micro-commitment that was made and not yet honored. Every saved file is a promise the future self is still waiting to keep. And the mind, that faithful and exhausting keeper of all open loops, holds each one in a kind of suspended attention, not urgently, not loudly, but persistently, the way a background application drains a battery without ever appearing on the screen. Elena wonders why she feels tired on mornings when she slept well. She wonders why focus comes so hard on days when nothing particularly difficult is being asked of her. She has never once connected that tiredness to the 43 tabs. But the connection is there, patient and exact, running like a current beneath everything she does. Here is the part that cuts deepest, the part that transforms this from a story about disorganization into something closer to a portrait of how we actually live now. The saving was never really about the content. The tab was never really about the article. When Elena bookmarked that essay about minimalism at 11 p.m. on a Tuesday, she wasn't making a reading plan. She was making a self-promise, a quiet, private declaration that she was the kind of person who reads essays about minimalism, who thinks carefully about how she lives, who takes the time to engage with ideas that matter. The save was an identity act. The download was a future self, preserved in amber, waiting to be inhabited. And this is true for almost everything we hoard digitally. The recipe represents the version of us that cooks with intention. The travel article represents the version of us that moves through the world with curiosity and freedom. The online course we purchased and never opened represents the version of us that is always, perpetually on the verge of becoming more than we currently are. We are not collecting content. We are collecting possible selves. And the tragedy is not that we save too much. It is that we save these versions of ourselves and then feel guilty every single day for not yet becoming them. And guilt, even the quiet and unexamined kind, is extraordinarily expensive. It doesn't announce itself the way acute guilt does. It doesn't arrive with weight and heat and the sharp clarity of having done something wrong. It seeps. It colors the ordinary hours with a faint but persistent gray, a low-level dissatisfaction that attaches itself to everything without ever fully explaining why it is there. You sit down to do something enjoyable and feel, underneath the enjoyment, the faint pressure of things undone. You try to rest and find that rest has a ceiling, a point beyond which the mind refuses to go, because there are still 43 tabs open and 847 files unexamined, and a downloads folder that has not been touched in 3 years. The digital accumulation creates what might be the most exhausting kind of work there is, work that never begins and therefore never ends, that exists in permanent anticipation of a starting point that never quite arrives. Elena is tired not because her life demands too much of her. She is tired because some part of her is always on some level, at the desk, sorting, preparing, getting ready to begin. There is something else living inside the hoarding that we rarely name directly, because naming it requires a kind of honesty that is uncomfortable in the specific way that true things sometimes are. The accumulation is also a defense against loss. Not loss of the files themselves, but loss of the feeling that accompanied finding them. There was a moment when that article appeared in your feed, and something in you leaned forward, lit up, felt the particular aliveness of discovering something that seemed to speak directly to a question you were carrying. That feeling was real. That feeling was good. And saving the article was on some level an attempt to preserve not the content, but the feeling, to keep the door open on that moment of aliveness so it couldn't fully close. Deletion then becomes not just the removal of a file, but the admission that the feeling has passed, that the version of you who needed that article has moved on, that the moment of recognition is over and cannot be recovered by keeping its container. We hold on to digital things the way we hold on to ticket stubs and receipts from restaurants that no longer exist, not because the object has value, but because throwing it away feels like agreeing to forget. And forgetting, in a life that moves as fast as this one does, feels like a small but genuine form of dying. The cruelest irony of digital hoarding is that the very act of saving things to engage with them later makes engaging with anything now significantly harder. Every open tab is not just an unread article. It is a subtle, persistent claim on your attention, a voice in a crowded room saying, "Not yet, come back to me." And when those voices number in the dozens or the hundreds, the room becomes so loud that genuine focus, the deep, immersive, time-dissolving kind of attention that makes work feel meaningful and rest feel restorative, becomes nearly impossible to find. You sit down to read one thing and feel the gravitational pull of everything else. You try to think clearly about one problem and find your mind sliding sideways toward the 17 other problems represented by the 17 other open windows. The tabs don't just live in the browser, they migrate. They follow you into conversations, into meals, into the soft and necessary hours before sleep, populating the mind with a low-grade static that never fully resolves into silence. We opened all those tabs in search of more knowledge, more possibility, more versions of the life we could be living. And what we built without meaning to was a very beautiful, very personal, very suffocating kind of noise. There is a particular moment that almost everyone who lives inside this accumulation has experienced, though few have described it out loud. It is the moment when you open your laptop with the genuine intention of doing one specific thing, answering one email, finishing one document, making one decision, and find yourself instead simply staring at the screen, paralyzed not by laziness but by abundance. The sheer volume of open things creates a kind of decision freeze, a state where the mind, confronted with too many equally weighted demands on its attention, quietly refuses to choose any of them and retreats instead into the one behavior that requires no decision at all, scrolling, refreshing, opening new tabs to add to the existing ones, generating more material to save for a future self who's already drowning in material, saved by past selves who had exactly the same intentions. It is a loop with no natural exit point, and it is one of the most common and least discussed experiences of modern cognitive life. We are not procrastinating because we are lazy. We are procrastinating because the architecture of our digital lives has made beginning feel like an act that requires navigating a maze we built ourselves, one saved file and one open tab at a time, over months and years of very good intentions. Elena closed 17 tabs one afternoon. Not all of them, 17, chosen almost at random, closed without reading, Without saving elsewhere, without the elaborate justification, ritual she usually required before allowing herself to let anything go. And the feeling that followed was not, as she'd always feared, the feeling of loss. It was something closer to the feeling of setting down a bag you'd been carrying so long you'd stopped noticing its weight. That specific, almost embarrassing relief of discovering that your shoulders could sit differently, that your body had been compensating for something it no longer needed to compensate for. The articles she closed were not read. The information in them was not absorbed. The possible selves they represented were not inhabited. And none of that turned out to matter in the way she had always assumed it would. The world did not become smaller. Her thinking did not become less rich. If anything, the opposite, in the space left by 17 closed tabs, something quieter and more useful moved in. Not more content, just a little more room to actually think, which is the one thing no tab, however carefully saved, has ever been able to do for us. So perhaps the invitation here is not to become someone who saves nothing, who hoards nothing, who moves through the digital world with the clean and unburdened efficiency of a person who has never felt the pull of a good article at the wrong hour. That person does not exist, and if they did, they would probably be less interesting for it. The invitation is smaller and more honest than that. It is simply to look at the accumulation with clear eyes and ask what it is actually costing you, not in storage space or processing power, but in the currency that matters most and replenishes most slowly: attention, clarity, the capacity to be fully present inside a single moment without feeling the gravitational pull of 1,000 other moments waiting to be addressed. Every tab you close is not a failure to become the person who would have read it. It is a choice to be more fully the person you already are right now, in this moment, with the attention you actually have, rather than the attention you perpetually plan to have someday when everything is finally, impossibly, perfectly organized. The possible selves saved in your downloads folder are not going anywhere, but the present self, the one sitting here right now, that one is always quietly running out of time. Elena still has too many tabs open. She probably always will in some form, because the impulse that drives the saving is not a flaw to be corrected, but a feature of a mind that is alive and curious and perpetually more interested in the world than any single day has hours to accommodate. But she has started doing something small, and she is found genuinely radical. Before she opens anything new, she closes something old, not with ceremony, not with grief, not with the elaborate internal negotiation that deletion used to require. Just quietly, the way you blow out a candle in a room you're leaving, acknowledging that the light served its purpose, that the moment it belonged to has passed, that the darkness left behind is not emptiness but space. Space for the next thing. Space for the actual work. Space for the particular, irreplaceable quality of a mind that is not performing readiness for a future that never quite arrives, but is instead, finally, fully, and without apology, here. The tabs will accumulate again. The folders will fill. The downloads will stack up like unread letters from a version of ourselves we keep meaning to become. But in the closing, in the small and deliberate act of letting go, we discover something the saving never could have given us: the profound and ordinary relief of having one less thing to carry,